What's up, everybody? On today's show, Ole Miss loses a transfer portal piece that could have been a big-time contributor in 2024. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. On today's show, we got plenty to get to. Ole Miss loses a transfer portal running back. The college football playoff schedule is set. And Bruce Pearl, could he leave Auburn for UConn if that job opens? We'll get into all of it. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, got plenty to discuss, so let's dive into it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right.
Takes the handoff.
What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we start over at Ole Miss as New Mexico transfer running back Jacory Croskey-Merritt flipped his commitment Wednesday evening back to Arizona. That's from On Three's Pete Nakos. The move comes a month and a half after he flipped his commitment from Arizona to Ole Miss. That was back on April 19th. Arizona had one of their more successful seasons last year, going 10-3, winning the Alamo Bowl against Oklahoma. Croskey-Merritt, he will be joining a pretty electrifying quarterback wide receiver tandem with Noah Fafita and McMillan, their receiver. But he began his career at Alabama State before he transferred to New Mexico last year. He will have 1 year of eligibility remaining, but he carried the ball last year 189 times for 1,190 rushing yards and 17 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he was very productive. Plays high school ball in the state of Alabama. But now it leaves Ole Miss kind of in a interesting spot when it comes to the running backs. Of course, this offseason, they lose stud starter Quinshon Judkins, who transferred out to Ohio State. They lose former four-star signee Kedrick Ricino, who a lot of people were high on, thought he could perform. And, look, Judkins rushed for over 1,100 yards last season with 15 rushing touchdowns. He was among the leaders in the SEC. So that now leaves Ole Miss with presumed starter Ulysses Bentley, former Miami running back Henry Parrish, who started his career at Ole Miss. He's back. And then a couple other transfers they added, Rashas Amos, who transfers in from Miami of Ohio, and former Clemson running back Domonique Thomas. So where does that leave Ole Miss as far as those guys in the production? Well, last season at Ole Miss, Ulysses Bentley ran for 540 yards and 4 touchdowns. He did rush for over 900 yards back in 2020 at SMU, so he's been a featured back before. Henry Parrish had over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns last season at Miami, had 600 the year before, so he's kind of a running back by committee dude. Amos was a 1,000-yard rusher last year at Miami of Ohio with 13 rushing touchdowns. He, of course, started his career at South Carolina. And then Domonique Thomas, he was at Clemson the past 2 seasons, rushed for just 116 yards and 1 touchdown last year with the Tigers. In January, he transferred to Georgia State, but following the spring, he decided to transfer to Ole Miss. So it's always funny to, refer to him as former Georgia State running back. He never played at Georgia State. He spent a spring there, and that was it. So we'll call him former Clemson running back. But, the most experienced now, Bentley has 5 seasons of playing experience. Henry Parrish has 4 seasons of playing time. Combine that with Amos and Thomas, and they're going to hope one of these guys will step up and produce. But, the guy of all the group that I was excited to see was Jacory Croskey-Merritt. I'm like, again, 1,200-yard rusher, 17 rushing touchdowns. We saw a little bit of him against Texas A&M last year. But he's flipping back, going to Arizona. So Lane Kiffin and company going to try to make it work. Look, I love everything else about Ole Miss, all the pieces they've added in the transfer portal on the defense. Obviously, having Jackson Dart back, that receiving core, I think their poise is just, man, you imagine where they could have been with Quinshon Judkins back, and you would have went locked and loaded. This is absolutely hands down one of the favorites in the SEC, and they still might be, but just some questions about that backfield until we see it in action. We know what Judkins was. We just don't know what this is going to look like with a, split backfield between Bentley and Parrish and so on and so forth. Lane Kiffin did make the rounds this week. He was over in Memphis earlier this week on the Dead Soxy Rebel Road Tour, talking with the voice of the Rebels, David Kellum, answering a bunch of questions. And he was asked about the running back room. He said, yeah, the running back room, we have Ulysses Bentley coming back. He's been out through spring, so we were able to go to the portal and get Henry Parrish to come back. He did mention Logan Diggs, the transfer from LSU. He said he had an ACL tear, so that recovery is a lot longer, and hopefully somewhere in the season he comes back for us. Logan Diggs, very productive running back at Notre Dame, and then transferred into LSU to play for Brian Kelly, who he knew, but transferring out to Ole Miss, but he did get injured this offseason, so that's where you don't know what the timetable is for Diggs. I mean, if he does come back before the end of the year, that'll be a nice addition to that backfield room, but certainly something to watch. All right, in other SEC news, over at Georgia, they added an elite linebacker on Wednesday, picking up commitment from five-star linebacker Zayden Walker. Had offers from a ton of different schools. He is the number 23 overall player and the number 2 linebacker in the class of 2025. He's the number 5 player from the state of Georgia, 6'1", 225 pounds. Took a visit to Athens this past weekend. He had gotten an offer from Georgia back in October of 2021. Had official visits scheduled to go visit Miami, Penn State, and South Carolina later this month. But he commits to Georgia. They now have 10 commitments for the class of 2025. Currently ranked number 9 in the nation. Also, Oregon defensive back Colin Gill committed to Georgia out of the transfer portal on Thursday. He was a freshman for Oregon last year, did not appear in any games, redshirted, but he was the number 102 cornerback in his class, the number 6 player from the D.C. area. So adding some depth to that DB room there for Georgia next season. And then down the road, looking ahead in the future, elite 2026 athlete Derek Cooper committed to Georgia yesterday evening, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's an athlete from the Fort Lauderdale area, had offers from Florida State and Alabama. Rated the number 2 athlete overall in the class of 2026. He said Georgia is family, always has been. It was really easy to make this decision. Now, according to the recruiting reports, he can play multiple positions, running back, wide receiver, defensive back. So we'll see where he ends up playing. But again, that's not for next year's class. It's the year after, class of 2026, committing to Georgia. Over at Auburn, fresh off his visit over to the Plains, 4-star corner Donovan Starr committed to Auburn on Thursday. He wrote in his post, "I just got this feeling, felt like home. And when you know, you know." He'd also recently visited Clemson and Tennessee. But a ton of offers from a bunch of different schools like Florida, Mississippi State, Missouri, Ole Miss. But Donovan Starr, 4-star cornerback, committing to Auburn. And Auburn's class now ranked 9th with 12 commitments. Joins the class with fellow 4-star corner Devin Williams and 3-star corner Dante Core. A few other tidbits here. 5-star wide receiver Decorian Moore, who had committed to LSU and then backed off his decommitment. A lot of people expecting, with all his ties to Texas, that he's going to end up going to Texas. But yesterday, he was hanging out in Baton Rouge, having another visit there, and was hanging out with former LSU legend Jamar Chase. Kind of funny that the Bengals wide receiver was not at OTAs in Cincinnati. He was in Baton Rouge hanging out with a 5-star wide receiver recruit. So we'll see if that maybe helps sway him back to committing to LSU and Brian Kelly, but doesn't hurt to bring out the big guns. Jamar Chase, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. One other tidbit here, Simeon Barrow is expected to stay with the Miami program. That's the kid that transferred, defensive lineman, transferred from Michigan State. Missouri was emerging as a landing spot for him because there were reports that maybe he wasn't going to go to Miami after all. Now reports are he's going to stay put at Miami. It's crazy, man. Like, report on a lot of these kids, it's like he went in the portal in December. Then he picked a new school in January. But then he went back in the portal and picked another school in April. But then, no, he backed off that, flipped to another school in May. It's just like you can't keep up with some of this stuff. But feel the need to update you guys on all the latest going on out there. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll get to those playoff dates that you need to know. That's coming your way here in just a sec. Well, first, I want to remind you guys this episode presented to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. And with that eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car that MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. That is ebaymotors.com. All right, roll along here to Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And hey, for your second listen, you can check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming for free on YouTube or the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Again, it's Locked On Sports Today. Again, you caught up on all the biggest stories of the day without all the yelling that you get on ESPN and some of the bigger networks. All right, we got to dive into this news that we got coming out this week, that the college football playoff has officially announced kickoff times and TV designations for their first ever 12-team college football playoff. That'll be played later this year. The 12-team playoff will feature 4 first-round games on campus sites from December 20th through December 21st. So the first playoff game is going to be Friday, December 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and that'll be on ABC and ESPN. So we'll get one little taste, one little playoff game out of the way on that Friday evening. And then that Saturday, we're going to have a triple header. You're going to have a playoff game at noon Eastern on TNT. You're going to have another playoff game at 4 Eastern on TNT. And then the Saturday night nightcap on December 21st, 8 p.m. Eastern on ABC, ESPN. Look, the news here is get your Christmas shopping done early. You don't want to be that dude that's missing college football playoff games on a Saturday because you're doing some last minute Christmas shopping. Again, that's, a couple days right before Christmas, we're getting the first round of playoff games. Then after that, we fast forward about a week and a half and we get the playoff quarterfinals. Tuesday, December 31st, that is New Year's Eve at night, we will get the Fiesta Bowl, which will be a quarterfinal game on ESPN. The next day on New Year's Day, we'll have the first playoff game that day. Again, another triple header. That'll be the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, followed by the Rose Bowl in the evening, 5 p.m. Eastern, because when the Rose Bowl has to play, when the sun is setting, on New Year's Day on ESPN. And then that night, 8:45 Eastern kickoff in the All-State Sugar Bowl on ESPN. Again, that's the evening of New Year's Day. So those are our 4 playoff quarterfinal games played on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Then we fast forward a week. Playoff semifinals will be Thursday, January 8th at 7:30 Eastern on ESPN will be the Orange Bowl. And then Friday, January 10th, 7:30 Eastern on ESPN will be the Cotton Bowl. So again, it's a little weird here, but we're so used to the semifinals being played on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. No, it's going to be the quarterfinals and then the semifinals on a random Thursday and Friday, January 9th and 10th. Again, it's going to take some getting used to. And then we wait a whole 10 days later. We come back and play the national championship game on Monday, January 20th, 7:30 Eastern on ESPN, and that will be featured in Atlanta this year. So I tweeted this out. It's just, look, it's going to be a lot tougher for college sports fans to engage with their team this year and travel. I mean, it was already hard for the average Joe to follow their team, say, to like when Alabama plays in a semifinal game in Phoenix and then a national championship game in Los Angeles. That's a lot of travel there for, an Alabama fan to do it. And frankly, Alabama made the playoffs so much in recent years, and Georgia's kind of been the same now. Like, a lot of Georgia and Bama fans had to decide, all right, well, maybe we'll skip the semifinal. Maybe we'll go to the championship game if they make it there. because it's a lot of bucks to spend on a lot of travel. And so I put out this hypothetical, and this is just kind of working through this year's schedule and how this thing is going to work. Keep in mind, the top 4 seeds in the playoff that all get that first round bye are all conference champs. So the only team from the SEC that is getting a first round bye is whoever wins the SEC. Any other SEC team that makes the playoff, and yes, we do believe 2 or 3 more SEC teams can make the playoff, with it being 12 teams, they're all playing in the first round. You're not getting a bye week. So I just threw out their hypothetical. I said, what if Ole Miss goes 10-2 and doesn't win the SEC? So they'll fall to an at-large game. And let's say they play the first round playoff game. They got to go up to State College, Pennsylvania, right? Let's say Penn State is ranked 1 spot ahead of Ole Miss or something, and Ole Miss got to go play them. That's a tough trip to make, but it's a cool game. Ole Miss, don't know if they've ever been to College Station. They did just beat Penn State in the bowl game, but okay, let's go up there and see that game. So the Rebels win the first round game. Then you win, and 2 weeks later, you got to go play a quarterfinal game. They're going to send you out to Phoenix, Arizona to play in the Fiesta Bowl. All right, fine. Let's go out there and let's root on the Rebels. If the Rebels win that one and advance, a week later, hypothetically, they could be playing a semifinal game in the Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. Okay, it's quite a trek down there from Oxford, but yeah, we'll go on down to Miami. We'll go support them there. And then if you're able to win that one and advance to the national championship, 2 weeks later, you play in Atlanta. Now, again, that's probably a little bit easier from Oxford over to Atlanta, but still, that's a lot of mileage, airfares, rental cars, hotels. I just described it as it's an epic path if you happen to have a ton of disposable income. But I just think the average college football fan is going to look at this and go, it's a lot of traveling, man. It's a lot of trips. And it won't all be that way. I would think that hopefully they try to keep this thing geographically making sense, right? Like maybe the Rose Bowl takes, if there's a Pac-12 champ versus, or not a Pac-12 champ, we don't have the Pac-12 anymore, but, let's say one of those Big Ten teams, if it happens to be a USC or something like that, maybe a Big 12 team, they take with Utah and the Arizona State being in the Big 12 now. For the SEC footprint, the Peach Bowl and the Sugar Bowl make sense. New Orleans and Atlanta, much closer than Phoenix or Los Angeles. And then, of course, with the Orange Bowl and the Cotton, Miami and Dallas still within the SEC footprint, so not too far. But again, just putting out there hypothetically, it's a lot of traveling. Like, let's say if you're Georgia, let's say the Georgia Bulldogs win the SEC this year, you're going to get that first round bye. This could work out in Georgia's favor, though, because let's just say hypothetically, Georgia goes to the quarterfinals and they put them in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Okay, right in Georgia's backyard. That's easy. And then the next week in the semifinals, let's say they send them down to Miami. Okay, a little bit of a trek down there from Atlanta or from Athens. And then, lo and behold, you get to the national championship, it's back in Atlanta. So, again, I think Georgia's probably got the easiest pathway to least amount of travel for making the playoff. One other note here, in its entirety, the 2024 bowl season was announced yesterday, and that'll run from Saturday, December 14th through Saturday, January 4th. ESPN platforms are the home of bowl season, so they're carrying many of these games. But some other highlights when it comes to the SEC. Friday, December 27th, the Liberty Bowl will be played that Friday night at 7 p.m. on ESPN. So interesting. Liberty Bowl was played at daytime a lot in recent years, and so that will be a Friday night game at the Liberty Bowl. Monday, December 30th, 2:30 in the afternoon will be the Music City Bowl in Nashville. So that'll be a 2:30 afternoon game for Music City. And then on New Year's Eve, Tuesday, December 31st, we'll have the ReliaQuest Bowl at noon in Tampa. You'll have the Citrus Bowl at 3 in Orlando. And then it changed this year. The Texas Bowl is going to be played in the afternoon on New Year's Eve, 3:30 Eastern in Houston, all making way for the playoff game that night. So pretty interesting there. Those are all SEC Bowl implication games. But the Texas Bowl moving from what's been the last couple of years, like a Wednesday or Thursday night, it's moving to an afternoon game on New Year's Eve. Then on Thursday, January 2nd, this is interesting. At 7:30 at night, you'll get the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, standalone game. And then Friday, January 3rd, 7:30 at prime time will be the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte. So very interesting there. The Gator Bowl and Dukes Mayo Bowl both get primetime Thursday and Friday nights on January 2nd and January 3rd. So a lot of this, too, is kind of stay out of the way of the NFL as well. Like college football games, they're trying to push the bowl games and the playoff games to move them away from the NFL and not compete. But they will compete in some of those weekend games that the playoff has going on. So, we'll see what happens there. But certainly a lot of change and a lot of getting used to when it comes to the bowl season and the playoffs this year with the bowl expansion. All right, thank you guys for making a Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, a few more tidbits we will get to going on around the conference. That's coming your way next. Well, first, I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends at the Game Time app. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get the tip-off with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time is going to take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Of course, those last-minute deals, you could save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sporting events. And the all-in pricing, you toggle that feature. It'll show you the total up front with no surprise fees at the checkout. And the best part is the seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect before you head to the arena. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app now. Create an account. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. All right, roll along here to Locked On SEC. A couple more tidbits to get to before we call it a show. And we stop off over in Auburn next as Brian Battie, the running back, continuing to recover in a Florida intensive care unit after being shot several weeks ago. His family shared a promising update on Wednesday on his condition. According to the GoFundMe update from his godmother, he began to show movement in his left side and then eventually his right side on Saturday. He also was recently taken off a ventilator and had a tracheotomy. Just awful news, but they said Brian is still currently in the ICU, but we're fortunate to share that he was able to give a thumbs up to his mom with his left hand. It showed movement in his left leg. So again, absolutely tragic story. We know Hugh Freeze addressed Battie's condition at spring meetings last week. Said he's getting better. Honor the family. Don't want to go into too many things, but appreciate all the prayers for sure. Been a difficult time. If you missed it, there was a shooting occurred in his hometown of Sarasota, Florida, a couple weeks ago. His brother was pronounced dead at the scene. 4 others were injured, and reports that he was shot in the head. And he's been in the hospital ever since. And put football aside, just hope the best for that young man moving forward. Certainly would love more positive updates there. Speaking of Auburn, interesting thing to monitor here. News coming out yesterday that the Los Angeles Lakers are reportedly targeting UConn head basketball coach Dan Hurley as their next head coach. There have been reports that J.J. Redick was going to land that gig. Well, what ties does that have to the SEC? Well, Jeff Goodman, formerly of ESPN and CBS, the Field of 68, he named his top option. He tweeted out, he said, if Dan Hurley leaves UConn for the Lakers the guy I would target is Auburn's Bruce Pearl. Said grew up in New England, has the personality to follow Dan Hurley, can coach, can recruit, and his buyout is reasonable. I talked with a couple of people close to Auburn yesterday, and they said no chance. They don't think that Bruce Pearl would leave for UConn. Of course, money talks, but again, first things first, Dan Hurley's got to leave the UConn job for the Lakers. It has not officially happened yet. It's been reported that there's mutual interest there, and Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that, but we'll see what happens, the dominoes that fall. But to be this late in the game, I mean, you're talking June, end of the first week of June here already. Bruce Pearl just locked up the final piece of his roster, signing transfer Miles Kelly. I just, it'd be a big ask to say, hey, Bruce Pearl, come jump up here. Now, the other part of this, too, for folks around the SEC, if Dan Hurley does leave, no matter who they hire, let's just say, for argument's sake, they promote within. A lot of guys on that roster are going to hit the transfer portal. And as we know, we saw it with Alabama. You get 30 days to poach, 30 days for those kids to jump in the portal and they can go wherever they want. And whether you're Nate Oates or whoever, you can jump in there and go grab a UConn kid. Go grab a kid who just won 2 championships, back-to-back championships. Be interesting to track that. Speaking on basketball, too, another tidbit here. New Alabama basketball practice facilities in the works and is estimated to cost about $57 million. The Alabama System Board of Trustees met Thursday, voted to approve the 48,000 square foot facility, and now it'll go to the entire board to vote on today. Greg Byrne telling the Tuscaloosa News, right now we're focused on the new practice facility. We're focused on trying to navigate the waters of college athletics right now and the uncertainty, and then Coleman Coliseum isn't getting any younger, and it will need to be addressed. But this gives us a big step forward for our program in the meantime. When the new arena was announced, the proposed cost was $183 million. And by the following summer, the cost had jumped up to $250 million because of inflation, according to Byrne. So keep an eye on that. But new Alabama basketball practice facility in the works. And one more tidbit here over on the SEC Diamond. Zane Denton entering the transfer portal Thursday after not playing for Tennessee this past year. He was a big hero for the Vols during the 2023 College World Series. Announced in August he was returning to Tennessee for another season after going undrafted in the MLB draft, but he never returned to the roster due to personal reasons. Tony Vitello indicated in September that Denton was sitting out fall baseball while handling some things he had to do. Denton and Vitello continued to meet in January leading up to the season, but he never joined the team. Switch hitting third baseman, has 1 season of eligibility remaining, as a career .276 hitter with 39 home runs and 156 runs batted in 195 games played. He's the second Vol to enter the portal behind pitcher Wyatt Evans, who also did not play this season. There you have it. You're all caught up on all things SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Come on back and keep checking us out. We'll be back on Monday recapping all the action of the weekend. And hey, for your second listen, check out Locked On. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7. Hey, congrats to Oklahoma winning the women's college softball championship College World Series in Oklahoma City. 4 straight years Oklahoma has won it there right in their own backyard. 30 minutes up the road from Norman in Oklahoma City. Hey, bring those to the SEC. I mean, next few years, if Oklahoma wants to keep winning it, sure, it's more titles for the SEC, but I got a feeling that road's going to get a little bit tougher playing in the SEC. Look, every SEC team made the women's, made the tournament this year. So a lot of good coaches in this league. We'll see if Oklahoma can keep up that dominance. And hey, best of luck to all the SEC teams in the baseball regionals happening this weekend as well. Some teams playing at home, Tennessee and Kentucky and Texas A&M and Georgia. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll see who comes out of this weekend and punches their ticket to Omaha. We'll talk about it on Monday. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been a Locked On SEC. You guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you then.